I'm going to share one more story. But before I do that, I want to tell you why I'm here. Humbly speaking, I get over 100 speaking requests a month from our staff in Denver to speak at organizations. There's only 30 days of the month. There's only 20 working days. And I have a wife and 3 kids. So I try not to travel 300 days. I only try to travel 275 days of the year. It's hard. It's very hard. So when you get a request to go to Wilmington, North Carolina, and I can only pay you 1/25 of your speaking fee, you say no to all those. No offense. And I love Wilmington, and I appreciate the boat ride, Scott, but it's not worth getting on a plane and coming here. But I love my cousin, Joe Welsh. And my cousin Joe went through the most painful divorce 3 years ago. And I never thought that he was going to get his ass out of that misery. And then he met a woman named Melanie Orlando. And she changed his life. And then I met her. I met what a genuine, wonderful woman. I would have married this girl if I met her. He would have no chance in hell. And then she told me that she was in the mortgage business. And no offense to the mortgage business, but and no offense to the young man in the room that sells used cars that I met, and I told him that I'm going to pick on him a little bit. But I can't stand used car salesmen and mortgage brokers and timeshare salesmen, because I'm all about intimate, authentic relationships, and they're the most transactional business out there. And I remember picking on Melanie about spending a lot of times in Wachovia, a great bank. I banked in East Carolina, and she spent 29 years, and her business partner, Bob's, probably spent 40 years in the business. I mean, they got an incredible team. I was teasing her. It's a transactional business, and she said, I want to do something different. I want to call it envision. I want to envision differently about actually building a mortgage company that can actually value customers and actually have relationships with customers. And I'm here because I love my cousin. I'm here because I love Melanie. I want to thank them both for inviting me here. Thank you. Thanks. And that young man in the audience that sells used cars, where are you, sir? Where are you? Stand up. I talked to him, and I told him about how I feel about used car salesmen. He looked at me, he called me sir. He says, but I do it differently. And I have more repeat business because I know everyone hates used car salesmen. And I tell him that when I sell him a car, and I do it differently. He's going to be successful, that kid. Envision Corporation is going to be successful because they're going to do it differently. They're going to shift from a transactional model to building truly authentic, meaningful relationships with your customers and clients. I want to close with my favorite story, and it really is a story about the spirit of relationships with all people. Because I'm a business speaker. My book is a Random House business book. It really talks about business culture. But that really wasn't my intention. My heart is the world. But to be totally transparent, Random House saw it as a business book, and they told me if you want the book, it's a business book. So that's what I do. But I like to speak about other things. And the story is in the book, but it has nothing to do with business. But it does have everything to do with business. I had a chance to work in the Olympics. After I graduated East Carolina, I was trying to go to law school. I was trying to study for LSAT. I needed to save up some money because I didn't have much money. So I got this job, my really first big job, working for the Olympics in Japan, because the founder of Up People knew the chairman of the Olympic Committee of Nagano. The 1996 Winter Olympics were, obviously the Summer Olympics were in Atlanta, but the Winter Olympics were in Nagano, in this little village in Japan. And they were looking for an English teacher that had worldwide experience that can go over and teach English to the Japanese athletes, to the Japanese IOC, the Olympic Committee, and the volunteers of this village that were about to host this huge worldwide event called the Winter Olympics. And it's just totally ironic that a kid that can't even read or write got the English teaching job in Japan. But I always thought it would be some competitive advantage if I can teach the Japanese real crap English. Maybe the Americans would win the gold and, But I went over there, and it was an incredible experience living in this little village of 8,000 villagers of Japanese people and no Americans. I was the first American to actually live in this village. And it was incredibly hard because my years at Up People, we had translators, we had students that spoke 10 different languages, but to be this American kid that can barely speak English in this village with kanji and katakana and all these Japanese characters, it was a hard couple weeks to get accustomed. And I remember my first week at the job, I had this apartment about the size of this stage, and it was a tiny little apartment. I walk in there, and it was just cobwebs everywhere. It's like a person hasn't lived there since the 1972 Sapporo Olympics. I mean, it was just dirty, and I'm kind of a neat freak. So I went down to the store. They don't have like a Piggly Wiggly or a King Soopers. It's like these tiny little village shops. And I was trying to find some cleaning detergent and some scrubbing pads so I can clean my place up. And I get down there, and no one spoke English, and I couldn't speak Japanese. I'm looking my way around, and I got the cleaning detergent pretty easy because it's kind of a bald guy, Japanese, kind of like this on a bottle. It looked like the Ajax guy, so I got that. And then I'm trying to find these scrubbing pads. I couldn't find them anywhere. So I went a few aisles over, and I found this big box of 12 scrubbing pads, and I bought those. I went to the cash register, and this Japanese lady, she was looking at me like I'm crazy. I got that look everywhere because they'd never seen a white guy before. But she looked at me utterly crazy. I get back home, I get the bucket of water, and I pour the Ajax in, and I open the box to get my scrubbing pads out. Turns out I bought a box of maxi pads, and I didn't understand the thing, and now I know why the lady is looking at me like I'm crazy, but I was so embarrassed to return the things. I washed my whole damn place with those maxi pads. And I Windex with them, I clean them, so I'm here to tell any woman that's breaching menopause, don't throw those suckers out. You can clean the whole house with those things. I mean, it's amazing how thing. Anyway, so that was my first week at the job. I got 3 or 4 other stories that I really can't tell publicly. That just, I mean, it was just a tough couple of weeks, getting accustomed to living in this village. And finally, I got a knock on the door, and this beautiful Japanese woman, old enough to be my mom, Mrs. Tanaka, comes over with this beautiful kimono and this big box of food. I mean, I smelt it just at the door. And she spoke English. And she said, "My name is Mrs. Tanaka. My husband and I own the local bakery down the street." And I knew that bakery because I would see cars lined out 4, 5, 6 in the morning, getting up early. Those Japanese people get up early and they work and they want their coffee, they want their baked goods, and they had their local bakery. And she said, "I want to learn English and I want to introduce myself and I have some gifts for you." And she opened my refrigerator and she filled my refrigerator with all these incredible foods. And then she saw that I had my shampoo and my conditioner in the refrigerator. And she said, "Why do you have your shampoo in the refrigerator?" I said, "My shower stall it freezes if I leave it there because it's so cold in this village. I didn't know how to turn the heat on." She showed me how to turn the heat on in my place, took me to the post office, took me to the bank. She just really became my Japanese mom, told me how to kind of live in this village. And this went on for 3, 4, 5 months. I'd go to her house. She'd come to my house. I'd go to dinner at her house. I'd go to her bakery. I'd help her out. I met her 3 kids, just wonderful Japanese kids. They loved meeting me. I played sports with them. I built a great relationship with Mrs. Tanaka and her 3 kids. But I noticed as months went on, because I lived in this village for 2 years, that Mr. Tanaka, the husband, every time I came over, he would just get up and walk out. I'd come over, he'd walk out. It was like clockwork. It was like he didn't want to talk to me. And at first, the first times I went there, I thought he was just shy because Japanese people, if anyone ever been to Japan before, you know that they're very shy people, especially if they don't command the language. And then once you break down that and you build a relationship, they would do anything for you, but he was very shy. But Mrs. Tanaka bowed her head when I asked her, "Mrs. Tanaka, why does your husband walk out of the room every time I walk in? Every time I walk in, every time I come over, why does your husband walk out?" And she started getting teary-eyed, and her pale, white, beautiful skin got bright red, and she was ashamed about what she was about to tell me. And I looked in her eyes, and I said, "Tell me, why does your husband walk out every time I come over?" And she says to me, "Tommy, my husband, he hates you." I said, "Wow. I mean, I know I'm a New York Giants fan, but you don't have to hate me." "My husband hates your country." I said, "Why? Why does he hate me? Why does he hate my country so much?" He says, "My husband is 52 years old. And 50 years ago, he lived in a little village called Hiroshima, or Hiroshima, as you say it. And when your country bombed his town, he lost his mom and dad and his brother and sister. And he was left an orphan at 2 years old. And those burn marks that you see in the side of his arms and the side of his face aren't because of our bakery, of the hot ovens. It's because when he was a little baby, the radiation burned the skin off his body, and he spent most of his youth in a hospital." And then she handed me a Japanese dictionary, and she said, "Look up the word adoption." So I looked up the word adoption in English. And there was actually no translation. And she said, there's no translation because we don't adopt in Japan, because we're so proud of our bloodlines and our heritage and our lineage that we just put them in the orphanage, and the government, the state, raises them. So that's where my husband went to as a young child, a young baby, and grew up. And then I met him in college. And when I met him, he told me the story because I asked about his face and arms. He told me that he'll always hate America and always hate Americans. So Tommy, there's really nothing you could do